But Levon needs to make this decision. He has to capture that white pawn that's just moved. You cannot allow it to continue marching up the board. It will just become too strong, and you'll have to keep an eye on it forever. So right now, black has to take off that pawn. He does. White has a choice now. White can take that pawn, or he can go the other way with his king. He goes the other way with his king.
He goes the other way. A nice move by Magnus. So the king has just activated itself, is potentially attacking a pawn, but mainly it's all going to be about winning pawns and at the same time issuing threats to the black king.
Yeah, exactly. Black's king very, very
shaky.
Stuck right now. Yep, and potentially going to be eyed up by the white rook as well. So, yep, a lot of black pawns are going to drop off. Temporarily, black is actually a pawn up, which is a bit surprising considering just 2-3 moves ago, Magnus could have gone a pawn up for seemingly nothing. So right now, black is a pawn up, but a lot of his pawns are going to drop. And, OK, he decides you can't defend all of those pawns. The black rook needs to get active first. And there we go. The first pawn drops. Magnus Carlsen regaining a pawn there, material parity. And another one bites the dust. Another pawn drops off there. White's king snacking on a pawn. But Levon, he's distracted away the white king. Now, black pawns are going active. That's a runner. That's a pass pawn. Yep. The only pass pawn in the position, actually, is that black pawn. So white's rook is going to have to get distracted, stopping it.
You have to control those pass pawns. You always have to keep an eye on them. And, OK, so what is Magnus going to do? Perhaps just start advancing one of his own pawns?
Yep.
And no?
First, he goes after that black pawn. He decided that was the most urgent priority. You surprised, Ivanka?
Slightly surprised, because if I were black, I would just simply go rook takes pawn.
But Levon going under the minute on the clock here.
Yeah, and that's going to be worrying because now it is pure calculation. It is a little bit of pressure to deal with. Maybe you can hold it with accurate play, but one slip, white's just going to be a pawn up, maybe even 2 pawns up for nothing. So, yeah, that clock situation is worrying for Levon. OK,
rook takes pawn on the board, and Magnus instantaneously playing rook takes pawn. And one move that I was considering here is actually to step the rook 1 square forward just to attack the corner pawn. Oh, look at that.
Reading his mind.
Levon plays it. And the idea is that if white has 2 options. White can either push the pawn, as Magnus has done, or maybe use the rook to defend it. But that moving the rook to a passive square would not have been advisable. And now
black offers the rook trade. White could not add, well, maybe white could have done, but white did not want to trade off those rooks because it would have helped black create a pass pawn of his own, and king of pawn endgames, that pawn would have run through, would have promoted before white's pawns. And instead, Magnus keeping the rooks on the board. So both sides are a bit stuck here. What's black's next move? That's the question. You kind of don't want to move anything, in a way.
Right. I mean, you don't really want to be moving your king 1 step backwards, because suddenly you're going to give white the opportunity, once the rook trade happens, to push the most pawn with check.
OK, so big decision here. I think Magnus will just shuffle his king to the side. OK, the evaluation bar really not liking black's last move. Let's try and work out the consequences. I think
king moves. OK,
yep,
king moves across.
Yep. And maybe black just giving ground with his king. I don't think he needed to do that. The black king was needed, maybe, where it was to stop the white king stepping forward later. And Levon Aronian shaking his head there quite aggressively. He knows that now he's had to give way. White was actually threatening to trade rooks there, and then the white king would have brought itself back down over to the left side of the board. So no more rook trades. White's a pawn up. You cannot allow the trade of rooks. And OK, Stockfish. The computer suggests pushing white's central pawn. That's not easy. That's not obvious. Yes, you create a passed pawn of your own, but the more pawn trades happen, the more likely we are to head towards a draw. Rook endgames are so tricky to evaluate because even being down 1 pawn, often you can hold a draw comfortably. So right now, I'm not 100% sure about the Stockfish suggestion. Maybe it's very, very good, but it is taking a bit more risk as well. It's narrowing the margin for error for Magnus Carlsen. So he could just keep the tension, but no, he goes for it. He seizes the moment.
He's gone for it. And, OK, great move by Magnus. And according to Stockfish, he has excellent chances to win. But, OK, this is according to Stockfish. This is with perfect computer play.
Yeah, and
we
sometimes
have humans on the board.
Yeah, sometimes though the computers, we shouldn't look too much at them because it might say +2, but it might be a fortress or it might be a draw.
OK, well, hang on a second, because in 25 seconds left on the clock, Levon Aronian just moved his king, and I don't know.
He's blundered. Now, next move, it's check now. It's a discover check, and once black's king moves, white's rook's just going to step up 1 square. It's about to win black's pawn. Levon Aronian, he's shaking his head. He's just lost a second pawn. 2 pawns, you won't be able to save the game. 1 pawn down, maybe he had some chances, but Magnus working that endgame magic again. Time after time he's doing this. It's impressive.
Yeah, and you can see Levon shaking his head. He knows that he's let any chances of a draw strips.
I just want to mention Artemiev also in big trouble. The bar loving it for Ding, and Vladislav Artemiev 30 seconds left on the clock. Drama in that one as well. What's happening here?
Yep, this one is simply 2 pawns up, and the problem for Black is he won't be able to deal with both of them. Yes, he can deal with 1 pawn, but the 2 pawns will stretch Black's army to the maximum, and 1 pawn will occupy the Black king, 1 pawn will occupy the Black rook, and at the right time, White's king is maybe going to go over to the other side of the board and cost Black his rook. So White's king's going to go over to support the other pawn. With this last move, Magnus is getting ready. A really nice idea, actually. He's getting ready. He's going to step his rook down 1 square, most likely, and then he's just going to protect both of his pawns with 1 rook. OK, he does the same idea, but up of rank. So that's even more... well, that's even stronger.
Yeah, and now it comes, and here you go.
The White rook's on a perfect square.
Beautiful defensive play.
And now the White king is free to run across.
And assist the pawn on the left. OK, so now the king is going to start his march. There's nothing to stop it.
Yeah, exactly.
And why is he giving a check? Because does he want more?
Let's trust him.
Yeah.
I think his endgame skills are just... I mean, exemplary right now, but you're right. He didn't need to give the check. He could have just walked over with the king, right? That would have done the job equally well. Yeah, so White, he's going to use the same strategy, but with his rook now on the 6th rank. Earlier, he started on the 5th. Now he's moving up to the 6th.
Yeah, the king
2 white pawns are going to push.
carefully moves downwards. It doesn't move up. And now White is simply going to push those 2 pawns, move it up 1 square forward, and... there's just nothing to stop the White king marching over to the left and assisting that pawn in its promotion quest.
And look at that, Ding Liren, he has won the 2nd game against Vladislav Artemiev, so that means he is up by 1 point in their semi-final match. And Magnus Carlsen is about to tie this match then?
Yes, yeah, those pawns are... Well, it's inevitable now. Those pawns are marching forward. One of them is going to become a queen, or at least cost Black his rook. So Black's king stuck. Look at this, Magnus paralysing the Black king with his pawn there, and the White king is, ready to run over.
Is there any chance for any stalemates? Because we saw Wesley was quite
some really sneaky stalemate. Unfortunately, I don't think there will be, because Black's king is always going to have squares to run to, as long as you don't trap the opponent's king, allowing Black to give up a rook.
And there you can see
stalemates in this one.
No stalemates here.
So White's king... This is very slow progress, but it's sure progress.
Yes,
this is
like the tortoise. You know, slow and steady will win the race, absolutely guaranteed. And now the king, as fast as it can, will march its way. OK, there you go.
Yeah, kings are slow pieces, only moving 1 square across each time.
Now it's going to move 1 square to the right. Oh, OK, the rook moves. It's the same idea.
Yeah, there's no rush. Just keep everything protected. White's rook doing a great job. And Levon Aronian resigns. He knows that he cannot save this endgame any longer.
It's over. Magnus Carlsen is able to tie the semi-final match against Levon Aronian. They have now won 1 game each, both with the white pieces. And